She was 44, elegant in her silence, her hands folded neatly in her lap. I remember the way her eyes searched mine, half questioning, half hoping, as she leaned in and said softly, "I thought I was doing something healthy. But why do I feel so disconnected now?" It's a question I've heard more times than I can count, from women who have spent decades nurturing others, building families, showing up for the world, only to one day find themselves unsure how to show up for themselves. And in the quiet of their bedrooms, in the most private moments of self-touch, they start to wonder, is something wrong with me? I'm Dr. Eliza Hart. For over 15 years, I've worked closely with women navigating life. After 40, helping them make peace with their changing hormones, rebuild intimacy with their bodies, and rediscover the quiet power of feminine vitality. One of the most overlooked areas in that journey, masturbation. Yes, I said it. That deeply personal habit we rarely talk about in public, but one that affects everything from your pelvic floor to your mood, your sleep, your confidence, and even your hormones. You've probably heard it's natural, healthy, maybe even essential. And it can be. But what if I told you that how you do it matters far more than you've ever been told? That there are subtle yet serious mistakes. Many women over 40 make mistakes that can dull your sensitivity, increase vaginal dryness, flatten desire, and quietly chip away at your sense of connection with yourself. These aren't dramatic errors. They're quiet ones. But over time, they shape how you feel as a woman. So today, I want to reveal 7 of the most common self-pleasure mistakes I've seen in my practice truths that could help you reclaim not just your body, but your voice, your softness, your spark. If you've ever felt confused, numb, or ashamed, know this. You're not alone, and it's not too late. Let's begin. 1. Mistake number 1. Thinking arousal should be instant like before. One of the most common concerns I hear from women over 40 begins with a hushed confession, "I don't get wet the way I used to." It's often said with shame, as if their bodies are betraying them. But what these women don't realize, and what I wish every woman knew, is that this isn't failure. It's physiology. And more importantly, it's normal. After 40, your body enters a phase of subtle yet powerful transformation. Estrogen, the hormone responsible for maintaining tissue elasticity, moisture and blood flow to the pelvic region, begins to decline gradually. And with it, the speed at which you become physically aroused may also slow down. Where once a kiss or fleeting thought could stir immediate readiness, now the process may take longer. And that's not a loss. It's a new rhythm. I think of Grace, a 42-year-old marketing executive who came to see me because she believed her sexuality had faded. She wasn't feeling as responsive, and it troubled her deeply. But after a thoughtful conversation and some gentle exploration, it became clear she wasn't broken. She was just expecting her 25-year-old body to still be running the show. Once she gave herself permission to slow down, to take time, and to explore her needs without pressure, something shifted. Her pleasure returned not in a rush, but in waves deeper and more intentional. This is what I call the rewriting of expectations. When we stop measuring arousal by speed or wetness and instead view it as an unfolding experience, we begin to understand our bodies as wise, not flawed. The reality is, your arousal is still there. It simply asks you to meet it differently now, with presence instead of pressure, curiosity instead of comparison. So if you find yourself frustrated that things don't happen as fast, remember, your body isn't regressing. It's evolving. And this evolution offers an opportunity for richer, more soulful intimacy, if only you're willing to let go of the stopwatch and instead listen to the music of your body as it changes tempo. 2. Mistake number 2. Using it to escape, not connect. Once we begin to understand that arousal after 40 requires more time and tenderness, the next question becomes, what is driving the act in the first place? Because while some women struggle with the speed of their response, others find themselves caught in a very different pattern that's quieter, more emotional, and often unnoticed, even by themselves. It usually begins innocently: a stressful day, a lonely night, the quiet ache of disconnection. And so, without thinking, the body becomes a refuge, a way to soothe what words can't quite reach. But when self-pleasure becomes a coping mechanism rather than a conscious act of self-connection, it begins to lose its meaning. The ritual stays, but the soul of it fades. I remember Helena, a 45-year-old widow who had recently become an empty nester. She came to me saying she'd lost her ability to feel. At first, she thought it was hormonal, perhaps even medical. But when we talked, a deeper story emerged. Each night, she would touch herself before bed, not out of desire, but out of habit. It helped her fall asleep, yes, but it left her feeling increasingly hollow. What she was really seeking wasn't climax. It was comfort. The brain is a powerful chemist. It releases oxytocin, dopamine, and serotonin during orgasm, chemicals that promote calm, even joy. But when those neurochemicals are triggered without emotional presence, they act like sugar, a temporary high followed by deeper depletion. Over time, this can subtly rewire how we process pleasure, replacing intimacy with numbness. So what can we do instead? Before each act, ask yourself gently, what am I really feeling right now? Loneliness, boredom, a need for touch, or simply a wish to feel alive? When you begin from a place of awareness, your body becomes a companion, not an escape route. And that shift from avoidance to connection can change everything. Because self-pleasure, when done mindfully, isn't just an act, it's a mirror. And if we're willing to look into it with softness, it can become one of the most honest forms of self-care we have. 3. Mistake number 3. Stopping altogether. After years of using self-touch as a quiet escape, many women eventually decide to give it up entirely. Not because they no longer have desire, but because they believe they no longer should. I've sat across from so many women who lowered their gaze and admitted, I haven't touched myself in years. It just felt inappropriate after a certain age. There's a deep cultural narrative here, one that quietly tells women over 40 to close that chapter, to shrink their sensuality, to fade gracefully into emotional silence. But that belief, however common, comes at a cost. You see, the phrase use it or lose it isn't a scare tactic, it's biology. The tissues of the vagina and vulva are responsive structures. They require blood flow, gentle stimulation, and hormonal signaling to remain healthy, elastic, and well lubricated. When that activity disappears entirely, when weeks turn into months and months into years, those tissues begin to atrophy. Collagen diminishes. Circulation slows, sensitivity dulls, and dryness becomes not just inconvenient, but painful. What was once a source of joy becomes a source of distress. I think often of Amy, a 48-year-old woman who came to me 2 years after her divorce. She hadn't been sexually active in all that time, not with a partner, not with herself. Her reason, I thought it didn't matter anymore. But it did. She began experiencing severe dryness, discomfort, and even micro-tears during routine pelvic exams. It wasn't her fault, it was disuse. Her body, neglected out of shame and silence, was sending a plea for attention. The good news? It wasn't too late. With just 1 to 2 sessions per week of gentle, intentional stimulation, often with the help of a quality water-based lubricant, her tissues began to respond again. Slowly but surely, she felt reconnected to a part of herself she had once believed was gone. So no pleasure is not just about desire. It's about maintenance, health, dignity. And stopping altogether doesn't protect you from aging, it accelerates it in ways we're rarely told. Have you ever found yourself slipping into one of these quiet patterns, expecting instant arousal, using touch to escape, or giving up completely? You're not alone. I invite you to share your story in the comments below. Someone out there might need to hear that they're not broken. They've simply been waiting to remember who they still are. 4. Mistake number 4. Overusing high-intensity vibrators. For women who haven't given up on self-pleasure entirely, there's another silent pitfall. One that's far less discussed, but increasingly common in my office. It begins with a desire to feel something, anything quickly. Perhaps there's less time, less patience, or simply less sensation than before. And so many women turn to high-powered vibrators for consistency, speed, and ease. At first it works, but gradually, without warning, something starts to fade. The body becomes less responsive. The gentle touch of a partner begins to feel muted. Even your own hands, once enough, seem to lose their magic. You begin to wonder if something is wrong with you. But the answer isn't dysfunction, it's desensitization. What most women don't realize is that these high-frequency devices, while effective in the short term, can quietly rewire your nervous system. The brain, ever adaptable, starts to associate pleasure with intensity alone, making subtler, more organic sensations feel insignificant by comparison. Diane, a 46-year-old client, came to me in tears. She had been using her vibrator nightly for over 2 years. Mainly, she said, because it got the job done. But lately, she found herself feeling nothing during intimacy. Not because she didn't care for her partner, but because her body simply didn't respond. "It's like I'm pressing mute on myself," she said. Her story, while painful, isn't rare. I've heard echoes of it from women across all walks of life. Strong, vibrant women who simply wanted to stay connected, but in doing so unknowingly traded connection for control. The good news is that this pattern, like any habit, can be gently unlearned. By reducing frequency, setting the vibrator aside for a time, and reintroducing softer, slower forms of touch, your breath, your fingers, your imagination, you allow your nervous system to reawaken. At first, it may feel dull, even frustrating, but with patience, sensation returns. And with it, something deeper presence. If your body no longer whispers back, it may be because the device has been shouting for too long. Turn down the volume. Listen differently. Trust that what's soft can still be powerful and what's slow can still be satisfying. Mistake 5. Doing it like you're still 25. After stepping away from overstimulation, many women expect that returning to gentle touch will bring back the sensations they once knew. But even with the best intentions, a subtle mistake often follows, trying to replicate exactly what used to work. The same strokes, the same timing, the same mental images. And when those old methods no longer lead to the same results, confusion sets in. Why doesn't it feel the way it used to, they ask. But the answer lies not in what's gone wrong, but in what's quietly changed. Your body after 40 is no longer operating on the same hormonal or vascular rhythm as it did in your 20s. Estrogen levels are lower, which affects lubrication and tissue sensitivity. Circulation may take longer to reach certain areas. Even your skin, which once responded to light, touch with electric sensitivity, now asks for more warmth, more time, more care. This isn't a decline, it's a transformation. But if you continue using an old map to explore a new landscape, you may always feel like you're lost. This is why I encourage my patients to rediscover themselves with fresh curiosity. Explore new areas, not just physically, but imaginatively. Let go of the script you've been following for decades and allow yourself to improvise. What happens when you slow down the pace dramatically? What emotions arise when you let go of the goal altogether? Sometimes the richest sensations come not from chasing climax, but from allowing the journey itself to unfold organically. One woman I worked with described the change beautifully. I stopped trying to make something happen, and instead, I let myself feel what was already there. That shift in mindset, away from performance toward presence, opened a door she didn't know existed. And what she found was not just pleasure, but a deeper intimacy with herself. So if your old ways no longer work, don't see it as failure. See it as an invitation to explore your evolving body like a beautiful, uncharted place. The destination may be different, but the journey now can be even more profound. Mistake number 6. feeling guilty or too old to touch yourself. By the time a woman reaches her 50s, she's often carried decades of roles. Mother wife, daughter, caregiver. Somewhere along the way, in the quiet between responsibilities, many women begin to internalize a cruel message that desire is something meant only for the young. That self-touch, once framed as curiosity or intimacy, now feels inappropriate, indulgent, or even shameful. I've heard this sentiment spoken in so many forms, always whispered, always tinged with embarrassment. I think I've outgrown that part of myself. But let me be clear. There is no expiration date on the need for connection and no statute of limitations on pleasure. The body does not forget how to feel. It only waits patiently for permission. Nora, a 52-year-old widow I worked with, hadn't touched herself since her husband's passing 6 years earlier. I thought that part of my life was over. She told me, her voice a mixture of resignation and grief, but under that stillness, I sensed something else, longing, not just for physical sensation, but for a reconnection with a version of herself she had buried too quickly. With time, encouragement, and a gentle reintroduction to her own body, Nora began to rediscover touch, not as a performance or duty, but as an act of self-kindness. And with it, her smile returned. Not the kind you give others, but the one that comes from remembering who you are beneath the silence. So many women wait for someone to tell them it's okay, to remind them that being a sexual being doesn't disappear with age. The truth is, desire after 40 is not only normal, it's often richer, wiser, more grounded. But you must be the one to give yourself permission. You are not too old. You are not inappropriate. You are simply overdue for reconnection with your body, with your tenderness, with the quiet places inside you that still long to be seen. And perhaps the most radical form of self-respect at this stage of life is to stop asking if you're allowed and simply begin. 7. Mistake number 7. Thinking it's just about pleasure. After moving past the guilt, many women finally begin to reclaim their right to touch themselves. But even then, some still miss a deeper truth. They see self-pleasure as a brief indulgence, something to fit between tasks or to help take the edge off. But what's often overlooked is that this private act, when done with awareness and intention, holds far more value than mere release. It is in fact one of the most powerful forms of self-maintenance a woman over 40 can engage in. From a biological standpoint, mindful self-touch stimulates the release of dopamine and oxytocin neurochemicals that improve mood, reduce anxiety, and help regulate sleep cycles. Simultaneously, gentle stimulation increases blood flow to the pelvic region, which not only enhances lubrication and tissue resilience, but also helps maintain hormonal balance in subtle but meaningful ways. In other words, this is not just a fleeting moment of pleasure, it is your body's way of restoring equilibrium. I often think of Laura, a 55-year-old nurse who came to me with chronic insomnia, low mood, and overwhelming fatigue. She hadn't associated any of it with a lack of sexual connection, not with a partner, not even with herself. But when we explored her history, it became clear she hadn't touched herself in over a decade. With some guidance, she began creating small rituals, an evening bath-scented lotion, soft music, a few quiet minutes alone. Within weeks, her sleep improved, her anxiety softened, she smiled more. "I feel like I'm coming back to life," she said. That is the difference between using touch for satisfaction and embracing it as self-care. When you slow down, set the scene, and honor your body with presence, the experience becomes less about reaching a goal and more about returning home. So if you've treated self-pleasure as something quick, functional, or even forgettable, I invite you to reconsider. You deserve more than just a climax. You deserve a sanctuary, a ritual, a space where you meet yourself without judgment or performance. And in that space, healing begins. And that brings us to the heart of this entire conversation. A gentle truth that so many women never get to hear. Yet, so deeply deserve to know your sexuality, your sensitivity, your right to pleasure and self-connection do not fade with age. They evolve. They soften. They ask for presence rather than pressure. And above all, they need your permission to come home. Throughout this journey, we've explored 7 common mistakes that quietly affect women after 40, often without them even realizing it. From expecting arousal to be instant, to using self-touch as a way to escape rather than connect. From abandoning pleasure altogether out of guilt or shame, to depending too heavily on intense devices that numb instead of awaken. From clinging to old methods that no longer suit a changing body to believing that you're too old to feel desire at all. And finally, perhaps the most overlooked mistake, reducing self-pleasure to a quick release, instead of embracing it as a ritual of nourishment, healing, and self-reclamation. None of these mistakes make you broken. They make you human, a woman shaped by culture, family, silence, and sacrifice. A woman whose story is still unfolding, no matter what the mirror or the world might suggest. And when you begin to meet your body, not with critique, but with curiosity, not with urgency, but with softness, you begin to discover something quietly revolutionary. As I often remind my patients, your desire doesn't disappear, it just whispers. Listen to it. Welcome it back, gently. So today, I invite you to let go of the scripts you've inherited, the shame that was never yours to carry, the belief that after a certain age, your body becomes irrelevant or worse, invisible. Because the truth is, you are not too late to feel, to touch, to dream, to rediscover. You are not broken, you are simply in need of care. And that care begins within. Start small, 15 minutes, no goal, no pressure. Just you and your breath. A bath, a candle, a quiet room. Let your hands meet your body, not for performance, but for presence. Ask nothing. Expect nothing. Just listen. And notice what stirs, what softens, what returns. Because this is not about youth. It's about reclaiming your right to feel alive in whatever way feels honest, grounded, and true for you. You're not too late. This is where it begins. Thank you for walking this deeply personal journey with me. I know these topics aren't always easy to talk about, especially for women who've spent a lifetime putting everyone else first. But if this conversation made you feel seen, if it sparked a new way of thinking about your body, your desire, or your worth, then I'm truly honored to have shared this space with you. If any part of this message spoke to your heart, I invite you to leave a comment below. Tell me which of the 7 truths resonated most with you. Your voice might be the one another woman needs to hear today, to feel less alone, less ashamed, more empowered. And if you'd like more honest, compassionate, and science-backed conversations like this, don't forget to subscribe. I'm here to help you reclaim your health, your sensuality, and your sense of self. One gentle truth at a time. Please consider sharing this video with a friend, sister, or woman you care about. You never know how much a single conversation can change a life. With gratitude and care, Dr. Eliza Hart.